once again, we're pleased to have Sam Swanson with us. I think it was about a year and a half ago ish that Sam obtained his MMR. So he's one of the many fantastic modelers up in the Cincinnati area. And so we're happy to have him here today. If by any chance over the years, if you haven't seen any of his presentations, shame on you, but you're in for a real treat today because you'll see that Sam is really a whiz at this. So Sam, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, Russ, you never cease to amuse me. So thanks for that. So, yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm really impressed with your meeting, the graphics, the way you run it, and even that mini clinic. So it's really, one of the aspects that doing a number of these to the various divisions is really seeing how you organize it. So I hope that this clinic is on par with really what has preceded it. So what I'd like to do today is really go through. Let's see here. And not being able to advance for whatever reason. There we go. All right. And what I'd like to go through is a variety of techniques for painting and weathering. That's really what we call finishing. And we'll look mostly at brush painting with acrylic paint, the inexpensive acrylics. I had my doubts a long time ago, maybe over 10 years ago, that you really could do fine model work with them. But as we transitioned out of Floquil and Polyscale, have tried these along with Vallejo, which is a lot of military modelers use. So we'll look at really applying acrylics over primed surfaces. We'll look at a specialty painting techniques for black. It seems to give a lot of folks a hard time sometimes in being able to impart certain colors, but not obscuring the detail that goes along with it. We'll look at weathering wood kits, or whether you scratch build out of wood. And that was a special request because some folks feel I spend too much time talking about making styrene look like wood. And so there are some good reasons for that. And it's mainly because when you have a model like this, that you have some sheet styrene, it makes the modeling a lot quicker. This is a scratch build of a prototype in the Attica and Arcadia short line in New York. And so Model Railroader had published some HO scale plans, and when I scaled them up with a photocopier to ON30, the evergreen styrene, novelty styrene that I had really on hand, really worked well to simulate these very narrow siding boards. So that was really the case here to build this model as quickly as possible. I'm not really very good at working with the smaller pieces of styrene. So when it comes to, say, the framing around the windows and the corners, I'll tend to use basswood. So I really don't have a problem mixing and matching. And that's really one of the points of the clinic that I'd like to make, is don't be inhibited by the materials that you use if you use a standard finishing technique. So sometimes the best way to start a model or a technique is to really practice on pieces. And so that's really the case here. A lot of people think, well, they'd rather just get on with the model. So then what I recommend is, if you're really one of those types, then start the technique on the back side, or the side that's to the backdrop. And that way, at least by the time you get around to the front of the structure, you'll either get more confident or better, or both. So this is a technique I often use, and just decide, all right, before I start in on the model, just say cut a piece, and this is just evergreen styrene. And in this case, it was just brushed with Floquil Polyscale. This model is about 16 or so years old, so Floquil was still around. So Floquil, earth, and nowadays I tend to spray a lot of the styrene, and Rust-Oleum and now Krylon have these camouflage colors, sand, khaki, and kind of some darker colors. So I really highly recommend those. Or you can use gray. Again, the most important aspect in priming styrene is to use a flat color. In this case, because it's going to be weathered, then you can see some of the styrene shows through. So you really vary the intensity of the tan to make to make some of the wood appear very light. And in this case, a tube acrylic was used. It was Liquitex, their basic line. It's a thicker acrylic, and again, some people don't like to use the thicker tube acrylic because it leaves brush strokes. Well, in this case, if you use a square brush that's no wider than 2 or 3 of the boards, and you brush along the grain, even if you leave brush strokes, then it'll look more like wood grain. And then the last step really was toning it down with some diluted black acrylic. Some people like to use India ink with alcohol, or if you just want to use completely water-based, you could just tone down or thin down some black acrylic. And I recommend black. Don't get any of the fancy names like Pavement or Meteorite or some other ones that you see. Just get plain black, and then it won't be purple or blue. It'll be a much more what you're used to in India ink. All right, so this is really then the finished model, using those same steps and sometimes iterating, say going and distressing with a hobby knife blade, or just scraping along, selectively staining some of the areas, or going back and adding a little bit more white in some of the areas, say under the eaves. So it's back and forth really on individual boards to really make them appear that way. And so hopefully in this model, it's in this photo, it's indistinguishable whether this is styrene or this is made out of basswood, or the frame or all the other components are all basswood as well. So that's really the whole goal here in developing a finishing and a weathering system, that regardless of what materials you've used, they really appear, in this case, a frame structure. The other thing about styrene is you can add detail the same as wood. You see the vertical nail hole lines. Those were just done in the same fashion as if this was a wood model, where you take a straight edge, a pin, and a needle vise, and then just add 1 or 2 nail holes per board. I know a lot of folks don't like to do that in HO, but I think it looks fairly reasonable in O scale. All right, and then just moving a little bit to the left on the model, this door, along with the framing, was done in wood, but the interior, that is just styrene, and that's scribed styrene. And because the outside, and we'll look at that slide in a moment, was covered with tar paper, that's a quick way to do interiors, is to use styrene, and then the vertical studs are just stained basswood glued directly onto the styrene, with a wood floor made out of stained basswood. So again, this back and forth interplay between basswood and styrene really helps you build the model a lot quicker. If indeed you wanted to have sheathing on both sides, if you laminate 20,000 styrene, you can certainly do that. The only thing I'd recommend is that you use CA, Loctite, super glue, or some other brand, because if you use solvent based, sometimes when you laminate styrene, it has a tendency to warp. Okay, so this is the exterior of that hand car shed, and the prototype had these pieces of tar paper in these unusual square pattern, and then they had the insel brick, which was asphalt shingle type material that was molded or formed to look like brick or stone, and again just slightly dry brushed to bring out that that detail. So again, that's why it was easy to build this structure out of styrene with the scribe on the inside, and then this material put on the outside. So as far as the tar paper, it is just spray painted notebook paper. And so just spray paint one side, and this is the inexpensive flat black spray paint that you can buy at Walmart. Again, the only key aspect is make sure it is truly flat. Don't get satin, semi-gloss, or anything else. Get flat, and just paint one side. And again, it doesn't have to be uniform. You can have some of the spray, and why I like notebook thicknesses that you want using the blue lines. Also, if you want specialty shingles, there's gaming paper out there that you can download, hex paper, sometimes people call it, and then you can just spray one side and then use the other side then to cut out the hexagonal shapes. And so that's what you see here, and then the two different sizes of or thicknesses of the rolled roofing or tar paper. And as far as getting this gray finish, and then just the edges of this, which was stained a little bit more brown, it was again painted flat black, and then just a acrylic wash of brown made it a little bit different from the surfaces that you see here. That's just a tan color, and we'll look at that in just a little bit when we talk about finishing black. But many times if you dry brush with an intermediate tan color, it will make the tar paper and any kind of black roofing surface a little bit more gray, but not the harshness of, say, using white. So you might want to consider that in some of your models. It's a little warmer way to convey kind of a grayer or fading type color for some of your models. So this is the acrylic black wash. I think many of us are maybe familiar with taking India ink and using rubbing alcohol, 71% alcohol, to dilute dilute the India ink. And I tend to like to just use acrylic black and dilute it with just tap water. I do make it wet, meaning I usually add a drop or so of liquid hand washing soap, antibacterial dishwashing soap. It doesn't really matter, and that makes allows the water to flow a little bit. But you can see just just the difference. And these are cast hoppers, urethane with some wood on the bottom. And these were hoppers that started out natural wood, but they were coal hoppers that the Mans Creek used. And so they almost looked like they were black in the photos just because of all the coal dust and soot and everything else that built up over time. But what I recommend is that you just make some diluted amounts that, brush a brush full, and then some water, whether you want to eyedrop it or just use the same container, and then you'll know the strengths over time. And you can always add another coat to build up some of the darkness. So start out light and then build up to some of the darker colors. So this hopper, again, it's cast plastic with some wood supplements. Again, doesn't really matter what the materials are if you use a consistent finishing approach. It was completely colored with just washes as far as the wood, and then some of the metal parts were accented with these potted paints. So in the craft areas, they have these sets of 16 or 20 that you can buy for $5 or $6. Sometimes they're themed. All of these colors were fall colors. So there's a lot of reds, browns, russets that are ideal for weathering. So look for those, very inexpensive. They last for a year and a half, 2 years or so before the little pots dry out, and then you can just clean them out and then use them for any custom mixes that you have. But the metal parts were picked out with these colors, and then once they were dry, then the chalk and Bragdon powders were used with a broad brush and even a finer brush to accent some of these areas particularly say the horizontal areas where soot and coal would accumulate. So it's really a stepwise way of imparting color and weathering as you go. All right, we'll move into some of the techniques for painting black. So this is an abutment made out of, and of course the name of the company is escaped, Microengineering. They make both standard gauge and narrow gauge trestles. These are just foam blocks that were carved to look like abutments. But this is really a three-step process, and that's after building the item, spray painting it black, dry brushing it with tan, and then going back with some burnt umber, raw umber, burnt sienna, acrylics, and dabbing those on and then washing those to get the corrosion look. So this is that bent before it was put on its base, and you can see the tan color that was used with a wide brush just to dry brush the entire surface to bring out the rivets, the lattice bracing, and then even the turnbuckles there on the tie rods in between the columns. So all of those are brought out with this tan, and this tan, usually just buy it a gallon at a time. It's the same latex that I've used really to seal the base surface before scenery on the layout. So any intermediate tan would work, and say just like any of these techniques practice. So these pieces were just spray painted, inexpensive flat black, and then dry brushed with the tan. And again, it kind of gives a gray look right away, weathered, faded black. And it also brings out the detail. Also, if you feel like you've applied too much tan, you can just then go over with a black wash and go back and forth and really fine tune the look that you'd like for the faded or weathered black look. And that same technique was used on various parts of this locomotive, whether it would be the boiler, the tender, the smokestack, or the stand or the steam dome. To get a little bit more subtle here, but then again, it's also a little bit more rusty. So that's really the idea here, was to start out with the same black color, but then with dry brushing and some washes to make each of those areas look a little bit different. So a variety of materials, brass, different types of styrene. This is a kit bash of a Bachmann Forney, and so there's cast metal parts that were pre-painted. There were parts that were made out of wood, but all of it was painted that flat black color after the building process was done. And so sometimes it's an iterative process where when you build, it's better to prime with a lighter color so you can see the components as you go. So even if the model is eventually going to be black, I still prime a lot of times with gray or some other lighter color so that I can prime, inspect, say, the boiler in this case, add the bands, add the rivets, which in this case are decals. This one had a very patched stack, which was just graph paper and a styrene cover. So many times back and forth before I'm ready to start the finishing process, I'll use a lighter color because it's easier to work with and see really alignments and then any imperfections that you have to correct. Because what you want to do is always finish all of your construction and then do your painting and then do your weathering. It doesn't always work that way. You may drop a model or that sort of thing, but that's really the goal. Construct, inspect after you prime, fix any of those, and then finish and weather. So this back head's a little different case. This is a Grant Line kit, and on this kit bash of the Betsy Jane, which is what this locomotive was called, the can motor stuck out, so I had to hide it in some fashion. So Grant Line has a Porter kit, and it's primarily molded in black. There were a few supplemental lines that it added with brass wire and and the lever guide with gray styrene. I think I may have lost the black one, and then the red faucet or valve handles. But sometimes you really don't have to prime or paint. What you can do is you have a model that's already black. You can just hit it with dull coat. That's the old Tester's dulling agent. There's others out there, but if you just spray it or brush it, then you can just add your washes and your dry brushing directly over the plastic color. And so then that's how this one was finished as well. So you can see there was a lot of dry brushing, and in this case, a lot to make it lighter. The one thing you want to consider when you have black items that are, say, housed in this can, because this is where that backhead fits against, that even if you have a cab that's fairly open with windows in the whole backside, that once you put a roof on it, a lot of that detail is lost because you really just can't see in there, particularly if you put an engineer in the engineer figure as well. So when you have black components and want to make them visible with all the detail, make them a little lighter than you normally would. All right, so now we'll go through a series of shots on how to paint structures with inexpensive craft acrylics. Again, I think it really doesn't matter what manufacturer you buy. I'm convinced the same company makes all of these brand names. They're pretty much all the same. The one thing you just want to make sure you don't do is buy the gloss paint. You really want the flat acrylics. They work the best. This was just an inadvertent purchase. And I think the key many times is that if it doesn't say gloss or satin, then you can assume it's flat. And then in this case, all of the modules, this is Wines Inlet that some of you may have seen as part of the Great Lakes group. We usually make an appearance at Carolyn Park and the Dayton Train Show. But in this case, all of the structures were built mostly to really test the viability of this. And this was about, I think started about 13 years ago. And then the potted paints, the smaller ones, were used to paint all the details. Again, just to make, try to make the colors a little bit different from the buildings to the details. So the first step in all of these was to really spray paint it with an inexpensive gray primer. This was the Walmart brand. I don't think they make it anymore. I think what I've seen in the stores, not that I've been in the stores very much over the last year, but I think many times they just have flat white and flat black now. But what you want to do is get the most inexpensive primer, a lighter color. And so now gone to those Rust-Oleum colors, and Krylon now has a competitor with that. And so whether you use gray or tan, it really doesn't matter. Again, you want to make sure it's flat for full coverage. And then have a variety of brushes. Usually the square wide ones work really well with these acrylics. And this is really the 4-step process that you prime it, you add the base color, you add you add a darker wash, and then you dry brush. All right, and so we'll talk about those. Again, the base color is what you want the model to essentially look like. The darker wash, in this case, it's shown as brown. It could be black, but the idea is that you wash a darker color to add shadows and bring out some of the details. So just if you look at the door here, and then the door here, with just a wash, you can see so much more detail with that door. So you're just creating shadows because the model is too small to really create its own shadows. And then the dry brushing is really to highlight some of the detail and then really impart color. And we'll look at examples of both of those. So these are all the examples. There were really some examples that were built or pulled just to show a variety of materials. So it really doesn't matter whether we have plastic that's been painted before or basswood or cast urethane or metal or pre-painted urethane or just raw wood, that we're going to prime them anyway. So really don't be constrained in any of the model materials that you have. If it looks good on your model, go ahead. And as far as putting it together, I use a lot of CA. Loctite is a brand that's readily available. And so if you want to tack it together with, say, yellow glue, look at it, get everything aligned, and then hit it with CA, then it'll be a nice solid model. And it doesn't really matter the material, even wood, if you use CA. But at this point, now that everything is a lighter color, primed, it's ready to be finished, but don't start. Inspect your model. Make sure that everything's aligned, that there's no gaps, that there's nothing that bothers you about the construction, because this is the time to fix it. Carve it, sand it, rebuild it, fill it in, what have you, and then reprime if you need to. So then it's time then to move on to the base coloring. And so again, you see a flat brush. That's what I prefer to do, the base coloring on all these structures, and many times try to vary up the color right from the start. So you can see just a little bit of tan here brushed into the white. And say on this side, vertical board and battens brush along the grain. The novelty siding brush along this on the grain, and then the shakes or the shingles brush along those as well. And that way, if you have any brush strokes, they'll look like wood grain. Even with models that are going to be a certain color, I'll tend to add a little bit of variation. And this is just a piece of glass that you can use as a palette, and then brush those so that there's individual boards. So right from the start, try to create a little bit of variation in the coloring. As far as painting gray, this is somewhat of a variation on using the tan to dry brush the black to really gray it out. In this case, we're using mostly tan with a little bit of black to make gray. So you can see the different colors of weathered wood, and it's really just how much black you actually put into your tan to make it a gray or weathered wood like. So these structures won't be painted; they'll just look like faded wood. So that it really start out with more of a brown color, and then add black washes to make it look like weathered wood. And then the next step then is to add a stain or a wash, which is just very diluted, in this case, very diluted black, and then diluted brown. And you can see the relative strengths because you can't really see the blue below the brown. So in the case of the white structure, this is a very thin black that's just used to accent either the battens or the horizontal portion of the novelty siding, or some of the gaps between the individual shingles, and even the diagonal framing or sheathing on the door. So hopefully you can see in that kind of that center block that's where the black wash has been applied to really start to bring out that detail. And if it's not enough, then you can add another wash. But you can also bring out the detail and start to impart another color. So if you use that darker brown, you can see that this is going to go from a tan to a brown color, but you're accenting the boards, the battens, the door sheathing, all in the same brush stroke. And so the next step after that, staining, washing, accenting of the shadows is done, is dry brushing. And that's taking a brush, and most of the time it's a brush that has been around for a while, one that you don't mind working the bristles out, because this is really hard on the brush. So you put some paint in there and you take most of it off by just rubbing it on a napkin or a paper towel. I prefer something with a little bit of texture so that you can see how much paint you're actually taking off, and then we'll get a good feel for how much is left on the brush. And so then you work that many times in a diagonal fashion across the components. So you start to bring out the wood and the bands. You can contrast the right side versus the left side that's yet to be dry brushed. And if you do somewhat of a contrasting color as well, you'll change the color a little bit. So in this case, this tan is really too much of a contrast, but you could go back with a green color, just a wash to really tone down that tan. But you can see how much it really does bring out the detail and the texture of that structure. All right, so then those 4 steps that we looked at: prime, base color, staining, and dry brushing. This is where it brings you to the model. And now it's really just a matter of adding detail, painting the details, and then adding any other detail like the windows or shades or that sort of thing. Going back and say texturing or weathering the roof, making it a little bit more rusty if you wanted to. So, and then this is the final version. So you can see a lot of the details, the smoke jacks, the bands, the doorknobs have been all painted. And so then it's just a matter of going back and adding some of the windows, and then you can selectively wash. For instance, I think this building here, you'll see the doors gotten darker, and then the window and the shade was put in, and then some of the shingles were darkened as well. So, so it's a matter of going from the bigger spaces to the smaller spaces to the final details. So it's somewhat of a systematic way, but again, because each model is a little bit different, you'll probably use a little bit of technique. Sometimes things don't come out to exactly as you want them, so it'd be time sometimes to redo the roof, but you can see the difference between them, the models. For instance, this tank, it received a number of additional black washes to really make it much more weathered. You can see it's somewhat graduated, where a lot of the weathering is down near the bottom. So really work out a system that appeals to you, and then apply that same system for the most part to each of the structures. And I think you'll get a lot of consistently weathered, painted type structures. All right, well, use that same process, and this is the last example in the clinic for really weathering wood to make it look like very textured and a building in very much need of a coat of paint. So this is what the model started out as. It was a laser cut kit that Gary Kohler had done for Matt Woods. He has a very small, limited company that we see occasionally at the Midwest Narrow Gauge show that's usually every March near Salem, Ohio, up northern Ohio. And so it's just 4 walls, 2 roof panels, and then laser cut, I think, cardboard for slate. And so this is the Ohio River and Western Tool Shed. So there's a prototype in northeastern Ohio along the narrow gauge there near the Ohio River. And in this case, the battens were really thinly laser cut. You can barely see the hinges. Those are actually laser cut into the panel as well. So I just supplemented this model with some basswood I had from leftover from an old project. That's why it's gray. So that added a bit more relief to this model, but otherwise it was really done, pretty much standard. So then the first step really was to undercoat the model by just priming it with some thin gray paint, and then texturing it with a hobby knife blade, X-Acto blade, number 11 blade. You can just see the very deep wood grain. And again, because wood, if you do use a stain, it tends to close up. That's why they're much deeper. And then what you see, some of the glossy bits, this is really the start of making peeling paint, and that's using this masking compound that you can buy. I know a lot of people like to use rubber cement. This is for watercolor, and it's probably about 20 times more expensive than rubber cement, but it doesn't have the stringing capabilities. It's water soluble, and it's just, for me, a lot easier to use, so it's worth it. You'll probably get 10 years out of the bottle before it becomes a blob of rubber, but don't do that much peeling paint anyway, so it probably takes 10 years to go through the bottle. But just taking a toothpick, you can make blobs, and it goes on white and it dries clear, so you can at least see where you've put it. But the idea on this model was that the lower portions have really received a lot of peeling paint, and then as it went up, even on the doors and up into this area, had a lot less weathered paint. So again, if you don't like either the smell or the stringiness of rubber cement, there's an alternative in the art departments at Michael's or Hobby Lobby, and it's just masking fluid. And so then after the entire side is masked, then it was just brush painted with just some white acrylic. And I think this was one of those warm white colors. They don't tend not to get the bright or the brilliant white, but they have warm white, antique white. Some of the off-whites are the ones that tend to use in those craft acrylics. And then after it's dry, a couple of hours or so, then taking a piece of masking tape, you can just pull off those pieces of rubber. So you can see the rough pieces on this side. And again, there was no real desire to completely coat the boards or the battens for that matter. And so that's why you see really the spotty painting on that side that's yet to be unmasked. So then the next step would be to go and add some of the knot holes. You can just drill those in, and then some of the washing. So it actually turns out really dark in this case, but even if you feel like it's too dark, you can sand it at this point, or you can take a clean brush dipped in rubbing alcohol, and you can run it down or along in dry brushing. So you can actually dry brush with a clean brush to take off some of that if you would like. You can also work some of these areas with a little bit of alcohol to expand them and make them look like thinning paint. So all of those are valid. You can do the whole side, or you can just do individual boards or battens to get this weathering effect. And then this is really the result of that, where this board, a lot of alcohol was applied just to take it down to the original color. And then in these cases, black was applied selectively and along the edge here. So the idea was that the lower edge are really weathered, and the upper edges, protected somewhat by the eaves, are a little bit better condition, marginally. So, and a little bit more wood grain was added. It's hobby knife blade, a little bit of sandpaper. You can selectively weather then each of those boards and batten as you'd like. And then dry brushing, it's the last step with that same warm white color. The lighting's a little different here. I'm not sure why, but I know it looks a little brighter white, but it really is the same model. But that's usually the last step besides nail holing, is to just diagonally, very lightly go across to bring out those battens one more time, and then just add a little bit of texture. So that's really the difference between this, where everything looks flat. And I wish the lighting wasn't as bad. So you can see the progression here. I should say bad, but is different. For whatever reason, I may not have white balanced on this shot, but I noticed this is a more warm shot. this is more cool shot. But in any regard, a little bit of light dry brushing is what really sets off the texture and for the model. And then again, if you model in something that's smaller than O scale, and that's what this one is, it was just done with a straight edge. Just tape the straight edge and then use a needle and a pin vise to add those nail holes along there. And then after they're added, then just a little bit of diluted burnt umber. In this case, you can also use burnt sienna. A lot of folks like to use that because it's a little bit more rust looking. Just washed along that nail line. And this is a little bit prominent when you compare it to the finish shot, where you just barely see that nail line. So this is another good example of just putting on a lot and then taking it off. You could sand it off, or you could just use a small brush with rubbing alcohol on it and then just go up and down, and you remove some of that brown. And you can then selectively do it in the area. Even you can see right here where the two battens come together. And the same technique then was used on the hinges and hasp and the lock to then just vary the amount of brown. So you can put it on, you can take it off, and go back and forth until you are comfortable with the model. And if it is too heavy, you could always dry brush it out as well. So that's another way to finish the model, complete it, and then really get it to your liking, because that's really the whole point. So this was the kit, and then this is just a block of pink foam that was just carved to make it look like a foundation and eventually be built into a hillside. And then this wood was just basswood was just glued right onto the foam block. So it's really a quick way to make a foundation. That's a Bob Lawson technique. So the foundation was painted with acrylics and then just textured. So consider using just the pink foam to make foundations. It's really a quick, lightweight, sturdy way to do that. So that really covers all the techniques that that I've used on these models, and used on really many of the models that you've probably seen over the last at least 10 years or so. So if there are any questions or comments, we can go over those.
Well, Sam from Russell here, fantastic work as always. You are an artist. I've seen many of your clinics, and when I've gotten home and tried to duplicate it, it's like a old Bill Cosby monologue. It turned out to be an ashtray. So, but I keep working on it.